Alex Lambsdorff, in Britain, there is a certain amount of disquiet about what's going on. The idea of coalition in the minds of many equals fragility, paralysis, hung parliaments they talk about. Are people right to be worried? I mean, when they look at Germany, even there are strains in your government, aren't there?
Yes, there are strains in our government, but the first thing I would like to tell our viewers is relax. Coalition governments are normal in a parliamentary system. Even with the first-past-the-post election system, as you could now see in the United Kingdom, it's not uncommon that you have that. And also, coalition governments can be good or can be bad. It is not saying that a one-party government, for example, does not do things that would be unpopular or that you can't sort of, run out of steam in a one-party government.
That's true, but there is a potential for a single issue. Say, for example, your country, Peter, in the Netherlands, the issue of whether or not to keep troops in Afghanistan. Let's not talk about the detail of that, but that derailed the whole government, didn't it, back in February? You're now facing an election.
That's correct. It was one issue that tackled our majority government. But on the other hand, I must congratulate Mr. Cameron and Mr. Clegg, since they only needed 5 days to get this coalition said and done. That's a really wonderful, marvellous thing. We should never have seen it in the Netherlands anyway. So it really worked very well.
How long does it usually take?
Well, the longest one was 140 days, so on the average it's 30 to 50 days. So to do it in 5 days is really excellent. You should be glad with that.
And if you look at Belgium, it's even worse.
Yes. Well, I mean, you're supposed to be telling us why the British should relax about it.
No, but I agree with Alex that basically it's all about stability and that we have coalitions which are pretty stable. And, for example, ours, which is now governing Poland, is a very stable and constructive coalition. Sometimes you have coalitions which are not very stable. So it is not a question of, coalition building, whether it's inherently good or bad, but it's about the parties which create a coalition, whether they can have a common program or not. And we in continental Europe have lots of experiences of both, and hopefully this coalition in Britain will come up with a single coherent program after only 5 days of sort of haggling about it, and it will lead Britain into stability.
How do the mechanics of this work? I mean, there will be issues, won't there, Alex, where you disagree fundamentally with the Christian Democrats on an issue, say here at the European Parliament. Who is putting pressure on you to vote in a particular way or not, and how do you decide where to come down?
Well, here in the European Parliament, that's the wonderful thing about this place, we have no treaties or coalition agreements like this, so because we are working in a presidential system. So the European Parliament cannot be compared with national parliaments. In national parliaments, where you have a parliamentary system of government, it is very, very important that the partners agree not to table anything in the plenary of Parliament without agreeing on it beforehand, because that may actually break a coalition. If one side tables something and then looks for votes in the national parliament, and you have different votes coming from outside the coalition, you will be in trouble very quickly.
I do think that this new coalition in Great Britain has a very good chance to overcome the next 5 years. You see, you need to build trust to make a coalition. And what I've seen in these very few days, that both parties, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Clegg, are building trust, and they are expressing the trust towards each other. And also, you do not need two captains on a ship. You have clearly one captain, that's Mr. Cameron, and Mr. Clegg, you should say, is the first officer. So there is also a clear positioning in the cabinet. And as a third element, I think it's very important, there's a great sense of urgency between the two parties, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, that the economic situation is really dramatic, and they have to work together. So they have a good sense of urgency as well to tackle the thing. So I really think they have a good starting position.
And as you say, the economic crisis will, for the moment, concentrate minds. But then it may be that policies like Europe, for example, will have the potential. Now, we've heard Mr. Clegg and the sort of language he's used, for example, about that new political grouping in which you sit with the Conservatives. How much do you think, in terms of Europe's relationship with Rafał, with Great Britain, the new coalition, it's going to matter that the senior member of that government no longer sits in a party, in a political grouping, a family where there are prime ministers, even European commissioners, that is a bit out in the cold.
Well, it will, because the thing is that it's not only about making politics in the European Parliament, where the Conservatives were quite influential within the biggest political group. I mean, they were occupying some of the most important posts. They were coordinating our works in 10 committees out of 22. And now they are, in a sense, marginalized. But this is not only about European Parliament. I mean, EPP members, the prime ministers, meet, for example, before every European summit. And they pre-cook the deals. And now it will be quite difficult for the Conservatives, to have a positive relation with the rest of the European countries, and I think that the burden will be on the Liberals actually to do that, which might be problematic for the coalition because, let's be honest about it, those two parties have different views on Europe.